given in the headlines here. Center says right to vote not same as freedom of voting. Okay. See, I want you to go through the points here. Okay, the center argued that in the Supreme Court that the right to vote in an election is different from the freedom of voting. So what are the 2 points that you are to understand here? Right to vote and freedom to vote. Are they not the same? Can you think of a difference? See, you read the headline. Even before the news comes out, like even before I give you the explanation, let's warm up. Think of this question. Right to vote and freedom to vote. Are they the same thing? They're different. That's why the headline makes sense. Okay. Now what? What is the difference? How are they different? Where you find this? Is there any provision in the Constitution? Article 19, you can interpret this. Okay. But what about the right to vote? Is it a constitutional right? What does UPSC say? Constitutional right. But what does Supreme Court say? It's a statutory right. So, should we take Supreme Court's answer or UPSC's answer? This time take Supreme Court because it was not clear before. Now it is very clear. So, what is the statute here? RPA 50 or 51? 50 or 51, sure. Are you sure? Okay, what is the difference between these two? This is, and this one? Okay. So this is a statutory right. Why do you think, can you think of a possible scenario in which there is a need to differentiate these two? Anyone? Is there a possibility of exercising freedom to vote and not exercise the right to vote? You have the freedom to vote and you also have the right to vote. Are they mutually exclusive? Did you understand my question? Does one follow the other or there are two different scenarios? Can you tell me a scenario where this headline will start making sense? Yes? Think of all the possible scenarios. Imagine a scenario where in that election, there is only one candidate who filed the nomination, and if the voting doesn't happen, what is the takeaway? If there is no electoral turnout, there is no need to have an election. Unanimously elected. What if I want to exercise nota? Can nota be a candidate? See, none of the above is a option. Election will happen when there are more than one or two candidates, at least two. Otherwise, election won't happen. This can be exercised only when there is an election. Right? You can have the freedom, but there should be an election, right? The right to vote, as you can see here, for anyone having a conflict about the key given by UPSC in 2017 paper, the answer is here. Even when I wrote the exam, I have marked it as a legal right. But the key was given as constitutional right. UPSC is the boss, you have to agree. But Supreme Court says, no, that's not the case. So, let me read the article. The center was responding to a petition seeking to declare section 53(2) of the RPA, so and so rule number and forms, which apply to uncontested elections. So there was this Vidhi Legal Policy Center which filed a case. Usually you will find two of these organizations, Vidhi Policy Research and the Association for Democratic Reforms. These two organizations continuously put pressure on the judiciary and the government to reform the electoral processes wherever there is some discrepancy. So it is in that kind of a context this question comes up, and it is very important for your prelims exam. That is the reason I want you to read line by line. Okay? They want to declare uncontested elections as illegal or against the constitutional spirit. Let's see the reasoning. Section 53, it kicks in when the number of candidates equals the number of seats to be filled in an assembly or Lok Sabha election. There is no election at all, like unanimously you are getting elected. In such cases, the provision instructs a returning officer to declare all such candidates as duly elected. The petitioners represented declaration without conducting a poll prevented citizens from exercising their right to vote or nota option. And about the contesting candidate, both the government and the Election Commission of India responded to whether declaration of a sole candidate without taking any poll was a violation of the electoral's right to express their unhappiness by voting nota. So what is the main problem here? What is the intent of nota? It's a expression of dissent. So when the present procedure is that one person is getting elected without any election at all. What if there is a section of people who believe that this person is not supposed to be in power? They'll come and express their dissent through nota. He might still win, but there should be an election. You might feel like if there is no way that nota can win, what is the point of this election? Because it's an electoral expense. Why have an election at all? Like, we will do away with this process. Why take this headache? This is one approach. The other approach is every vote matters. Every vote is a representation of the voice that this country gives to the most vulnerable sections of the society. It's the most powerful instrument to bring about a social change. Imagine a scenario where that candidate, he might be, let's say, a rowdy sheeter. People are scared to contest against him. And there is one person who comes out and votes for nota. But there should be an election for that to happen. So it essentially becomes an election between nota and the unchallenged nominated guy. Should this happen? Should this not happen? The present procedure says that there is no need to conduct an election. So, Supreme Court at this point intervened and said, if I have to treat nota like a candidate and not like just a expression of dissent, it requires a procedural amendment, like the legislative amendment. At this point of time, nota is not treated like a candidate. And therefore, there is a difference between the right to vote and the freedom to vote. Okay? Please go back and read this article. Okay. This article is not actually important for you directly from the prelims or mains perspective, but I will try to link this article from a very relatable standpoint. Something that every UPSC aspirant must think, like it is in a very practical sense. I am talking about a scenario where for the first time in the last 5 years, the major realtor companies, let's say for example, the Prestige Group, Shobha Developers, DLF, or Embassy Group, or the major builders in this country, who are an organized realtor, like they acquire land banks, build business parks or residential complexes, like gated communities. For the first time in the last 5 years, they decided not to go for a middle income targeting crowd, and the rationale they gave is middle class cannot afford a house in India now. The fact that real estate ownership is now only serving the needs of ultra rich and high net worth individuals, that speaks a lot about the present state of an economy. And another concept called Gini coefficient. So everybody is talking about per capita income, inflation, policy rates, all this is fine. Yesterday itself we were talking about this point. What impacts the taxpayer? So if you take a look at the commodity prices, whether it is the investment that is coming into this country or the consumption or net trade, wherever there is a market intervention. Market intervention is in bringing down the cost of consumer goods. You will notice that your basic phones, laptops, electronic goods, etc., their prices came down. The things that we don't need but good to have, their prices came down. And they want to drive the consumer economy through these commodities, FMCG industry, fast moving consumable goods. When you make it accessible, people feel like they can consume more. But if India were to become livable for the tax paying crowd, what is it that matters? Let's go back to the basics. Roti, kapda, makan. It's clear that makan, that is house, is no longer affordable. Food inflation is real. There is apparently, if I don't remember the exact data, somewhere around 40 to 50% rise post COVID in food prices. Do you see wage growth in the same level? Not for the middle class. Maybe a few software engineers and the IT industry saw a boom, which was again corrected in the last 2 quarters. People have been losing jobs. All the jobs that were inflated during the COVID, all the companies are downsizing it. So, on one hand, you are witnessing a pain point in the economy where taxpayers are unable to afford the most basic stuff. Education inflation is somewhere around 14 to 20%, depending on the city, every year. Let's say if your LKG fees is 1 lakh, next year it is 1 lakh 20, so on and so forth. It is exponentially rising. Imagine the state of parents. Their wages are not growing that much. Food inflation is 40%. Can go back and check the numbers. Maybe, let's say, even if it is a conservative estimate, let's say 30%. Or housing, I don't have to talk about it. You are in Hyderabad. Just ask your parents about the prices in 2019 and 2025. You will have your answer. For example, just rough figure I'm talking about. A small piece of land which costed somewhere around 4,000 rupees per square yard in 2015. Today that crossed 1 crore. 1 crore. 4,000 rupees, 1 crore. 100 square yards, 4,000 and you can say 4 lakhs and 1 crore. I'm talking about the whole bit. Look at the inflation there. Real estate prices increased, and therefore any construction project will have to be extracting that value out of the customers. So you're witnessing a fundamental shift in our economy where people can no longer afford even the basic necessities, and the jobs that are fueling this will continue to make things difficult for the middle class. So you need a fresh impetus from the government to make things affordable. 2, you will have to upskill quickly. This is the kind of pressure that the government is going through. When you have articles like this which say that top realtors are no longer catering to the common crowd, so that middle class dream will remain a middle class dream. At this point, at this juncture, just for context, the middle class segment where you talk about a double bedroom house or triple bedroom house, what was once 50 lakhs to 70 lakhs is now 1.8 to 3.4 crores. What kind of a middle class family, even if you are in a software job, very rich software job, how many households can actually afford a 3 crore flat? And the fact that all these flats are made for the luxury segment tells you so much about the disparity that this country is witnessing. It's a very big challenge. This is the context which will take us to the next article. Redraw the welfare architecture, place a universal basic income in the center. So this is an idea that has been in talks way back in 2016 itself, in the economics of it, 16 or 17, somewhere around that time. What is this concept of universal basic income? Any idea, guys? What is this? Universal basic income. Tell me, universal, what does it indicate? Universal means all. Basic, bare minimum. Income indicates cash transfer. Who gives it? Who gets it? Citizens. This is the simple schema of a universal basic income. Clear? Now the question is why? Why should we give it? Any answers? Why should we give universal basic income? Why should they give income? Then what is the market here for? Reduce inequality. But inequality, is it just because of economics? Or is there a social standing behind that as well? So, do you think some groups will deserve more? Some people deserve more. So, as a part of this universal basic income, are you saying that even Adani and Ambani will get monthly 5,000 rupees? Is it a valid proposition? So, the idea of universal needs to have a relook. Then what is the point of calling it universal basic income? Are you getting my question? Should we have a universal basic income or not? If you don't want to have a universal basic income, how will you differentiate? Which brings us back to the yesterday's article. We don't have the data, nor do we have the methodology. If you know you are going to get a basic income, even if you are a lakpati, if not a karodpati, even if it is 5,000 rupees, I will say that I did not get my last month income. What is a reliable way? In an economy that is predominantly for informal, where 90 to 95%, depending on the data sources, how will you decide who should get how much? Do you have a baseline? No. But should we give it? The question is unanimously yes. Because in a country that is so divided on economic lines, if you want to break out of that vicious cycle, giving that bare minimum income where you don't have to suffer. Let's say, imagine most of you are fortunate enough to have someone to take care, to maybe sponsor. Maybe things might not be as good as you would want it to be, but the fact that you are seated here and not worrying about a job, of course you are worried about the UPSC job, but survival is a good enough fact that you can afford to spend that time. But if you are seated in this class worrying about where am I going to get my next meal, it's not a happy place to perform to the best of your potential. It can be a great underdog story. But why should it be like that? In a country which is supposed to be the third, fourth, fifth largest economy at different points of time, is also the home for a lot of people who are worrying about dreaming about the next bureaucratic position, and at the same time worrying about the next meal. The presence of this dichotomy itself is a good enough reason. I'm giving you a relatable example. Imagine the same plight of a person who has a great aspiration to be an entrepreneur, but that guy doesn't have access to capital. He doesn't have any collateral. And poverty is not just economic in this country. It's also sociological. The vicious cycle of poverty will continue to exist if that barriers are not broken down. What do I mean by this sociological barriers? If a family is poor, whether it is because of caste, because of the region, they continue to remain poor, and that culture of poverty will continue to persist. How do you break it out of that loop? That person. How will you bring that person out of that loop? When he is not worried about his next meal, the bare minimum thing, maybe he'll try to pursue what he really wants. And that's the whole logic of universal basic income. It's not to make people lazy. No person is going to sit around with your 4,000, 5,000 rupees a month. But at least that is going to give him some breathing space that you don't have to starve. And this is alongside the welfare measures that you can have. Imagine where your food is subsidized, your rations are subsidized, your housing is somewhere taken care, and over and above that you have a health insurance and a universal basic income. Go do what you want to do. This is the logic behind it. If the person is lazy, that person will obviously be relatively deprived than the rest of the society. You got to work for what you really want. You are not entitled to get anything. So if the government is trying to make your life better, it is just the baseline, that is the threshold for that baseline is getting better than what it was. You don't have to worry about a lot of things. If your food, healthcare, education, everything is taken by the government, and on the top of that you are getting a universal basic income. If that is the case, maybe that aspirant can study. Right? That gives them the freedom of opportunity, like you can pursue any opportunity that you want. It should not be like only a person who has enough money should sit for this exam, right? It essentially is an invisible barrier created by the society that unless and until you have money, you cannot pursue this dream. And it should not, I'm giving an example that is relatable to you, but what if that person wants to be a pilot, a cricketer, an actor, a doctor, a soldier? It can be anything, right? Who are we to deny that opportunity? And what is the state here for? And the answer to that question is universal basic income. But can we afford it? Roughly, if we put 7,500 rupees per month as the basis, why this 7,500? What is? How much is this? Quick CSAT. Roughly, let's say we'll increase this and let's say 1 lakh. What is the per capita income? Somewhere around this. So what if you can give slightly lesser than per capita income as a universal basic income for every individual? It can trigger inflation, but that's where the question of universality comes into the picture. Because if you want to have a consumption-led growth, at this point of time, you are talking about a scenario where we have reached, where the wealth gap has reached a 75-year high. Inequality is at all-time high. How do we plug that gap? So we begin with the most vulnerable sections. Let's say you use the same metrics, socio-economic caste census, and start with them. It's not going to cost a lot. The markets will decide where the money will go. It will go to the most efficient one in persuading the consumer. That's a different story. So that is the whole premise of this article. Do we have international precedents? We have it in Finland, you have it in Iraq. If not on a universal level, staggered basis, like some sections of the societies are getting some basic income. In COVID, countries like Canada also gave to a certain extent. It's a different thing, like you rightly mentioned. You need to use your discretion. If you're pumping in literally 50 to 100% of your GDP into economy for giving out freebies, you're bound to have economic consequences. So what's the sweet spot? Maybe we can have a deliberation on that and arrive at a number that is acceptable for all. But let this idea of a universal basic income at least start lingering in the minds of the policymakers so that we have some traction of UBI as a potential solution to solve these problems. Alright? Okay. Moving on. So this whole issue of SIR etc. we will cover once the dust settles down and we have some concrete points. Otherwise it will be like a daily commentary, which I don't want to engage at this point of time. Alright. Are AI based tools for mental health helpful or harmful? Let's not read the data or the content because it's self-explanatory. Let's make it sort of a discussion. A state of mental well-being. What do you mean by that? Your ability to manage your emotions and different mental states and self-awareness. So different generations had different tolerance levels for emotions. So the present problem is that a generation that is raised in relatively abundant society, for the first time they are witnessing the challenge of needing that emotional resilience. So most of the teenagers and the youngsters of the Gen Z, like your crowd, they're turning to ChatGPT, Gemini and Claude kind of a platform to make it act like a mental health counselor. I'm pretty sure some of you must have tried that yourself. Like asking ChatGPT the existential questions that are very, scary to get an answer for. And it would have replied in a very nice, comforting way, and you felt, okay, this is nice. So you keep using it, only to realize that Sam Altman, this primary person behind OpenAI, ChatGPT, he announced that every piece of data that you are entering will be registered and it's out there in the open. So, is it safe? Can it be misused? Basically, this whole debate opened up a Pandora's box. Any possibility can happen. Like somebody can misuse, somebody can weaponize it. What is the way going forward to deal with this? Read that article from that lens, just for your awareness, just for understanding where we stand today. Okay? Why the nomination process needs reform? You are unlikely to get a question from this, but you need to know this headline as one line in your notes in GS2 7th point Representation of People's Act. In that electoral reforms, in that at max it will be one line or an example. What is the issue? There is a problem with the nomination process. Election Commission clearly delineated a process to carry out a nomination filing with an intent to make sure that no fraudulent cases are encouraged. But this is yet another case where the process itself feels like a punishment. The context of this latest question is that there was one lady in Dadra and Nagar Haveli, if I'm not wrong, in the recent municipal elections, she filed a nomination which was instantly rejected without any explanation. There was a small clerical error which can be fixed. Procedure should not completely alienate the right of the people to participate and contest an election, right? That restriction is only allowed on some legal grounds which are again established in the Representation of People Act, the disqualification. The problem is in many Supreme Court judgments also, they talked about disqualification but did not give a clarity on nomination, which is a reform area according to this article. So there are many Supreme Court cases here. Finally, what you have to know is the procedure is so lengthy, which is forcing the officers, the returning officers, who can have the discretion, but they're still sticking to the rules because they don't want to get involved in a headache. So this needs to change. And this is the central point of this article. All you have to do is take this one case. Where is this case? One case law. One. I think I read it in some other article, but I'll notify tomorrow the case law. I wanted to keep a note on that. There is a case law that you can pick up. I'll post it on the Telegram channel. I haven't posted it today. Please go back to the Telegram channel. I'll put it there. Okay. That's it for the day. Thank you.